I have a shameless plug. I really appreciate you guys listening in some ways to my conversations about identity, but did you know that chatting isn't the only thing I do? I love to paint. And now you can have a bit of my art in your house. It also makes great gifts, by the way. So check it out at aubreyjeanart.etsy.com. That's aubreyjeanart.etsy.com. And also hit me up on Instagram at my handle, aubreyjeanart. I'd love to hear from you. Welcome to 132nd Cherokee, a podcast exploring why being 132nd of a bloodline is meaningless. And surprisingly not at the same time. I'm your host, Aubrey Jean. In this episode, my friend Christina chats with me about being half Japanese, half white, but also what it's like to have a disconnect with her Japanese relatives who live in Hawaii. This is 132nd Cherokee with Christina. Enjoy. I sent you the link for the episode, and then you texted me, and you said something about...
So it made me kind of think about how I grew up. So my mom is full Japanese.
Mm-hmm. That's what this podcast is about, actually.
Yeah.
It's me being white and being 57 different things, and do I get to claim any of those ingredients at all? Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, I'm 58 ingredients because my mom is Japanese, but we know that she's pure.
She's full Japanese.
She is full Japanese. And so it just started making me think about, like, how me being half Japanese has affected me. But my mom grew up in Hawaii, and my family for generations has been in Hawaii, and I've been there several times. And it was just like the Japanese culture in Hawaii, like, is strong, but it's different than the regular Japanese culture or the standard, I guess. And I've gone to Japan.
Have you? I didn't know that.
Yeah, I went. But then when I get back to the States, I'm considered Japanese.
Right.
So it's just kind of like I don't have this real identity. And then it's just like, well, then I'm Japanese, but Hawaiian Japanese, which is a totally different culture. And then I didn't even grow up in that because I grew up in Alaska.
Right.
So it's just like, what do I call myself at this point? And I've always considered myself Japanese and tried to, adhere to the positive stereotypes.
So did you do that? You picked and chose. Oh, okay. So in Japanese culture, this, and I like that, so I'm gonna adopt it.
Pretty much.
Like what?
It was Japanese people they're really smart. They're very good with math. And until I got into college, I thought that I was really good at math. And then I realized, hey, I'm not really that good at math. And I've definitely been struggling with it as an adult. I don't do math after 5 o'clock. And I don't do math on weekends.
I love that rule. I think that's a rule that we should adhere to more often.
Yeah. So, and then there's just like, I tried really hard to be a good driver. I mean, even though I'm an aggressive driver.
Because of a stereotype of Japanese.
Asian people are terrible drivers.
Oh, interesting. And that's interesting that informed you of your driving habits.
Yeah, so I'm very conscious of it.
Break the stereotype.
I mean, like I said, I'm a very aggressive driver. Like, I feel like I would fit in some of the bigger cities, but the actual bad driving, not so much. And
when did you start adopting things? Like when
that?
Yeah.
I would say early. Like, well, at least with the positive stereotypes of the math and the being smart and working hard.
So when you started, obviously you saw your dad and your mom, and one looks Japanese, one looks white. My assumption. And
yes, that is correct. One looks white and one looks Japanese.
So growing up, was that like a thing? Do you know that mom is Japanese, dad is white? There is a difference between the two. Where did that kind of like start in your thinking that there are two different things to your identity?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's actually been more recent because I've always really identified as Japanese. But then as I started getting older, then it was just like, what kind of Japanese am I? I really want to learn the language because I don't know it. I'd love to go back and actually be able to have conversations instead of just like, where's the bathroom? Where's the toilet? Things like that, functional Japanese. So my dad was very proud that he had a Japanese wife and Japanese children.
That's kind of neat.
Yeah, it was always something that was glorified. Well, not really glorified, but like, you're Japanese, like you're really like you're cool, like it's something different and unique.
So he reinforced that positively.
Yeah. So I mean, that was really nice. And
that's interesting. So he went out of his way to reinforce that.
Yeah, and I think that's why, because my sister and I both strongly identify as Japanese, but as we've gotten older, it's just been like, but we're not. Like, it's just our blood. We're Twinkies, is what we call it. Yellow on the outside and white on the inside.
I've heard that before.
Yeah. Only Asians can use that.
I won't use it. Everybody will leave that in as a public service announcement that we are not allowed to call anyone Twinkies. When in doubt, don't say it. Yeah. Unless you're Christina. It is kind of cool that he acknowledged that there's only 4 of you in the house, right? So he's really outnumbered in the house, actually.
Oh, yeah.
But in
racially and sex ratio.
Yeah. But in this society, he's not outnumbered at all. So he must have already kind of acknowledged his privilege, I guess. And for him to try to give you as much empowerment as possible with that, I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, I guess I haven't thought about it like that.
Oh, well.
I mean,
does it resonate as true, or?
I think it does.
Yeah.
Like, it's very insightful. I don't often think about how I was raised, other than I had a good childhood.
Yeah.
So,
did your mom talk about being Japanese?
She doesn't really. She grew up in Hawaii and Alaska. She had 2 houses, one in each state, and there was
rich. Just kidding.
My great-grandmother was very good with money.
I was just teasing you, but okay.
But yeah, she was very good with money. I've read her stories. She was very good.
Neat.
So
pass that on. Read her story. She's got books about money management.
Oh no, she did an interview for the Hawaiian Historical Society.
I want to learn how to have 2 houses.
Yeah,
so that would be neat.
Stocks, and she worked.
Maybe that can be your podcast.
24/7. I know nothing about stocks. I'm so bad with money and math, and stocks is a lot of math. We already discussed this.
I don't know if it's a stereotype of any certain like race or cultural identity, but man, it would be nice. It sure would be nice if it were, so then we could kind of like garner what we liked. So your mom grew up in Hawaii and Alaska.
So she speaks a little bit of Hawaiian, but no Japanese. Like, when I went to Japan, I spoke the most Japanese in the house.
Wow.
And I took like a 6-week crash course on it. And I don't even think I can like, konnichiwa, watashi wa, blah, 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 blah. Like, introduce myself, and that is it.
Yeah.
So, but my mom, like, she loved growing up in Hawaii, but she doesn't bring it up all that often. We just had a family reunion recently, and we drove around the island, and she was like, that's where Grandpa had his store, and like, this is where we did this, and this is where we did that, and that wasn't there when she's pretty private about her past.
She has more family in Hawaii than Alaska, right?
Yeah, she has a brother in Alaska with his family, and then several cousins in Hawaii now, because my grandparents passed away several years ago. So
previously you told me that when you went to Hawaii, you have all your relatives there, that there is a little bit of a disconnect for you with the Japanese thing, but then the Hawaiian Japanese thing. Yeah. What was the disconnect that you saw?
Because I've been to both places, and I think I'm one of the few of the relatives that has.
You mean Japan and Hawaii? Japan and Hawaii.
There's a really strong Japanese-Hawaiian culture, and they use a lot of the Japanese language, but it's intermixed with the Hawaiian language. And so my aunt, who is totally awesome, if you're listening,
shout out to her aunt.
Shout out Auntie Joe. She's totally awesome. I had to explain to my sister and I a lot of things, a lot of the culture and things like that. And some of my other aunts who we met there had to explain a lot of it as well, as we were just totally, whitewashed, I guess.
Yeah.
Not exposed to a lot of it. And there was a lot of, and I don't know if it was a Japanese thing or if it was a Hawaiian thing, but there was a lot of ceremony behind their tombstones. there, like
tell me
washing.
about that.
Yeah, there was when we went. My aunt's parents, like we washed off their, what is it called? It's
Mausoleum?
Not a mausoleum, because they are cremated and then their ashes are put into like
an urn.
Yeah, but it's like a giant tombstone that like you can open.
Huh.
I don't know what it's called.
Insert name here. I'll edit it.
Yeah,
it's fine.
Insert name here. We don't know what it is. And then like so we had to wash all.
Crypt. Sorry. Okay.
Crypt is too big. we washed all of it, and then they put plastic flowers down, and then you just kind of like wash those off. And then there's also, oh crap, it's been
no cursing in this podcast.
Crap's not a curse
just
word.
kidding. I'm just kidding. I don't care about cursing either, but I thought it'd be funny.
Yeah, so, I mean, it was really interesting and to read the names, but at the same time not be able to read the names because they're all in Japanese.
Oh, huh.
And we
like being able to see it and know that you're connected to them, but at the same time, like there's a barrier there that you still can't quite reach across.
Yeah, I can't. The names are down on the bottom in English, and then everything on the top is Japanese, and you have no idea what it says.
Interesting.
And none of the aunts knew what it said either. Like, why don't we know what it says?
So every year they wash it? Or more than every year?
Yeah, every time that they go to visit. So we just happened to... We needed to see where they were, because I was doing some family history, because I'm LDS. But it was also just interesting to see where everything was.
Yeah.
And so we found a bunch of family names, found the cemeteries that they were at, and found their tombstones. And it was really hard to find the tombstones because we can't read the names.
That, I can see how that would be a problem.
Yeah, it's like we basically had to guess.
Yeah. It's interesting the connection that language has to those symbols, right? Language in written form, they're basically lines in a certain formation that convey either an idea or a sound. And it's interesting how I see that. That's really cool. She's showing me this picture with all, looks like the aunts and uncles standing around tombstone and with the flowers on the bottom and everything. And I can see at the top of the Japanese. I wouldn't know what it says either.
Yes, and then the little plate on the very bottom has their English names.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess at least there's that you could go and like search the English names.
But not all of them have that.
Oh.
That's just because they've, passed away. And
you kind of have to like have a map with where all the plots are and where the people that you know are.
Yeah.
Was there any reason that you guys were going around? It was because you were doing family history and collecting that information?
Yeah, I wanted to see it. You feel a weird connection with the past sometimes, and our Japanese side has been such a mystery for so long. Like we just found out what family my great-grandfather, I think it was adopted from. Like we found that out last year.
Oh wow.
My mom's side, her dad's dad was adopted. No boys were born. Boys are heir apparent of the families, and so if another family has extra sons, they basically send them over.
They graft them into a new family, basically.
Okay. I don't know if it's like a
interesting
buying or selling type thing, or if it's just like you now take this family's name so that it continues on. We just found out like what family that person came from, and then we also found out that when this, like, we all thought that it happened when he was young, but it didn't. He was like a young adult.
Really?
At that point. And
my gosh.
He did not want to be a part of our family.
I would love to have my hands on that guy. So that is interesting because, I mean, you grow up and you are part of your family. First of all, you have a connection to your family because you love them. Mm-hmm. But also if you're a young adult, you've already absorbed all the family history, all the lore, all the culture and experiences that this family has carrying around with them. And all of a sudden you are grafted into another family, starting over. I mean, how do you have that connection?
I don't know.
That's interesting.
It was kind of heartbreaking. I mean, and that's a cultural thing as an Asian, because I believe that probably the generation before that, or at least another generation before that, one of the generations before him, they were the first ones to come to Hawaii. So like the Asian culture was still very strong at that point, and as it's gotten down, it's become more of a Asian Hawaiian.
I identify as white, and I do understand I believe the value in my cultures and not discounting cultures that are European, just because those are the people who made me. And it is easy because there are so many white people in the world and they're in a position of dominance. Beyond the politics, there is something to be said for knowing the difference between my Dutch ancestry, my Polish ancestry, etc. Mm-hmm. Like your dad, I'm kind of a 57 mix. There's a lot of that in me. And so for me, picking and choosing, like my family has picked and chosen Cherokee for whatever reason. I'll have to ask my grandma, maybe she really connects with it and her dad really connected with it. And for you, what do you see there? You see white and you see Japanese, but the Japanese has a caveat to it. It's kind of Japanese and Hawaiian. So now that you're older, you're gravitating towards Japanese, right?
Yeah,
You've been gravitating.
Yeah, it's like I've been identified as Japanese for a long time. Mm-hmm. It was always like a sense of pride, like filling in that Asian bubble on all of my little tests that I took through my grade school years. Is like, I am Asian, I am not white. Only recently, because sometimes you can pick two, have I started being like, all right, like I'm also white. Huh. Okay. Yeah.
What would be, so in my case, part of the podcast is because the question is there. What happens if we're not Cherokee? What happens if you're not Japanese? That's just hypothetical. I know you are.
Well, I mean, so I took a DNA test a long time ago in college, and it came back. This is because like white people are infatuated with DNA, and Asians are not. So, and even my sister ran into this just a couple of years ago. This problem where it's just like, you come from Asia, but what I got back was, we came from China, and I told my mom, and she was like, no, we didn't. Like, she was very firm, like, absolutely not. We are not Chinese. We are Japanese. So that was kind of like my first, like, oh, like, I can't be anything else.
There is a difference.
There is a difference. And my mom's generation, the Japanese and the Chinese did not get along.
Right.
So she was very offended.
It would be a shock.
Yeah, she was very, very offended by that realization. And I was just like, well, Mom, like, in all honesty, a long, long time ago, the Chinese people did immigrate to Japan. Like, that's how it got settled. Uh-huh. But nope, absolutely not. Like, we are Japanese. You are Japanese.
I mean, it's part of identity. Where do you come from? When do you come from that area? And how is that been passed down through your family and been a shared family experience?
Yeah. So, and I guess recently now where I'm like learning how much of a Twinkie I am, that I have this really strong desire to learn the culture and learn the language and go back and try to integrate myself more, because
But not to Hawaii, back to Japan.
Back to Japan, and I love Hawaii. I love my relatives that are there, and it is a rich and fascinating culture, but to get back to like the actual roots of things is my big desire.
So along with that, this is my last big question. I know. So your big desire is to go back and find the very root of your roots. Mm-hmm.
Not Chinese. No offense to any of the Chinese listeners.
That everybody wants to just be pinpointed as they really are, not in a general location. So you want to go back to your roots. You want to go back to Japan. You want to bypass Hawaii and go back to Japan. Is there a part of you that wonders how and if you'll be accepted or seen for what you feel you are?
I think that's one of my main reasons for wanting to do it. Like, I've always wanted to learn Japanese, and as I've gotten older, it's one of the caveats of learning more things is that you realize how much you don't know. I used to think that I was an expert in Japanese culture when I was young, and then I was just like, holy crap, I don't know anything.
Whole culture, you're like, I
got it, I know it. And then
you're welcome.
Yeah, about I would say like 5 years ago, it was just like, holy, I don't know anything. Like, this is what I'm claiming to be, and I don't know any of it.
I think that's a very honest place to be.
Yeah, so it's just like I have this strong desire. Once I learn all of the Japanese stuff, I'd love to go and learn the Hawaiian stuff as well, because just to make those connections.
But Japan is calling you first.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's Japan.
It's cool. That's on my bucket list.
It's cool. Japan is so cool. And their food is delicious. And they're so nice. And
ooh, I can't wait until you make me Japanese food.
I can make you sushi. Sure.
For those of you listening, Christina just held up a sign that said, hell no.
She's lying. I don't write that fast. I love being Asian. And I still cling to it. I just want to be more Asian. But it also probably has a lot to do with, my family history on my dad's side is almost complete. We can go back many, many generations, where on my mom's side, we can only go back a few generations. Until, I think it was the late 1800s, when my family first migrated. Then everything before that, we don't know. And we can't get it because it's all in Japanese records. You have to be able to read and speak it to get those things.
Well, it sounds like your work is really easy.
I can do it by the end of the month.
Okay.
It is
excellent. We will be tuning
30th.
back in with Christina to see
tomorrow
how her journey learning Japanese has been, and she can give us some insights about those question marks.
Yeah, right. Can I plug something?
Plug it.
Support your local schools. They're highly underfunded, especially the younger grades. They are so underfunded.
What would you recommend them doing in whatever area that they live in? Calling up the school district, or?
Calling up the school district, just, get a couple of gift cards and give them to the teachers and be like, this is for your classes. They work really, really hard, and they have a higher calling. They really do. I have so much respect for the teachers that I work with, and it's been a very eye-opening experience working in a special ed elementary.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's a good idea, the gift card thing. I'm going to look into that. Well, thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Okay, talk to you soon.
Later, Gators.
One 30-second Cherokee with Aubrey Jean, and with all the favors I can cash in. Produced by me, Aubrey. Executive produced by nobody, because I don't know what that means. The Anchor app by Spotify holds my hand for all the engineering. The music is also found on Anchor. You can rate and review this show on many podcast platforms someday, and you might find your review featured on a future episode. Or I might burn it in effigy. Got comments? Send me a message at anchor.fm/Aubrey-Jean. That's anchor.fm/Aubrey-Jean.